Thank you for your talk. I prefer to announce that I'm asking this question as a young guy. You thought that there is no threat from Iran against Israel, according to some documents from the United States. But the Iranian government has officially announced that they are helping Hezbollah in Lebanon in their 22-day war against Israel. And there are some evidences that Iran is doing something against the Israeli diplomats in Malaysia, or, Iran is supporting Bashar al-Assad. I mean, is the only country supporting Bashar al-Assad, the government of Syria. Okay, but maybe this is my question. If you mean threat, if you mean the using nuclear weapon against Israel, by threat. But let's say, Iran maybe won't use nuclear weapon against Israel, but maybe Iran would use that nuclear weapon as a force to do something against Israel. For example, assassination, or maybe helping Lebanon or Palestine. So actually, give them weapons, give them lots of things. So in that case, what would happen? Iran trying to do something against Israel, but not using directly nuclear weapons. Just use nuclear weapons as a force to avoid attacks from the Western countries.
Yeah, I'm afraid I didn't catch it.
So the question is, if Iran would get nuclear capabilities but not use them directly, but rather use them as a
deterrent,
as a deterrent, or as an opportunity to use conventional weapons more effectively?
Well, there's no chance in the world that Iran would use conventional weapons, because they'll be wiped out. They're utterly dwarfed by even Israeli military capacity in comparison to the United States. It's minuscule. So the chances of unless they happen to have a suicidal impulse, which nobody believes, they're very unlikely to use force. That's exactly what U.S. intelligence and the Pentagon regularly report to Congress. There are people that have said that even the strategic doctrine is purely defensive, try to deter an invasion. If we get nuclear capability, it would be the same. They will destabilize the region, that is, try to extend their influence to neighboring countries and support clients elsewhere. So in other words, they'll act like any other power. And it's a nice government. It's a horrible government, pretty much like a lot of others, not the worst. But that's not the issue. If they do get nuclear capability, the threat is deterrence. The United States and Israel will be restricted on what they can do. In fact, if Israel does decide to bomb Iran, which wouldn't happen without at least tacit U.S. support, very likely the first thing they'll do is pretty much wipe out Lebanon. There are rockets all over Lebanon, and they don't want to face that. They couldn't face them last time, now it's much worse. So chances are the first thing that will happen is Lebanon goes down the tube, Gaza too maybe, and then they'll be free to attack. Very likely the attack will be with missiles, not with airplanes. And as I say, German submarines do allow them to deploy missiles, even nuclear-tipped missiles, right off the coast of Iran, where they probably are right now. And of course, enormous U.S. force there. The Persian Gulf is practically wall-to-wall American aircraft carriers and other military vessels. So they're just surrounded by extraordinary force. A lot of it is not discussed much, but a lot of U.S. force is based in the Indian Ocean. There is an African nuclear weapons-free zone, except it can't be implemented because the United States and Britain refuse. There's an island in the Indian Ocean which Britain claims, the African Union takes it to be their island. It's Diego Garcia. And the United States told the British to kick the population out, which they obediently did, base there. It's one of the main bases for bombing Central Asia and the Middle East. And Obama has built it up enormously, expanded it so it includes nuclear submarines, aircraft carriers, and so on. And as long as the U.S. insists, with British support and European silence, that Diego Garcia have nuclear weapons, the African Union can't institute the nuclear weapons-free zone. But that's only part of it. I mean, there's a huge military apparatus surrounding Iran. Actually, it's kind of similar to the Cold War. If you take a look at the Cold, in a month, we're going to be commemorating the 50th anniversary of the most dangerous moment in history. Not my phrase, that's the phrase of Kennedy's leading intellectual advisor, Arthur Schlesinger. That's the Cuban Missile Crisis. If you take a look at what happened in the Cuban Missile Crisis, the United States had a terrorist campaign running against Cuba, Operation Mongoose. It was quite serious. And its plan was to have an invasion of Cuba in October 1962, which of course the Cubans and the Russians knew. That's when the missiles were sent. Then came a confrontation which practically led to Kennedy himself judged the probability of a nuclear war at about 1/3 to 1/2. Nuclear war would have wiped out the Northern Hemisphere. And the crucial issue at the end, this is always called Kennedy's finest hour. In my view, it's the most criminal moment in human history. The issue at the end was would Khrushchev, the Russian Prime Minister, made an offer that the Russians would withdraw the missiles from Cuba if the United States would publicly withdraw missiles from Turkey. Now, the missiles from Turkey were obsolete. They were being withdrawn anyway because they were being replaced by invulnerable Polaris submarines. And of course, Russia was totally surrounded by massive military force which could have just wiped them out in a minute. So the issue was, would Kennedy agree publicly to withdraw obsolete missiles which were being replaced in return for a Russian withdrawal of missiles? And Kennedy refused. Had to maintain the macho image. And so, of course, they withdrew the missiles, but not publicly. And it was necessary to humiliate Russia. But the assumption is the entire world can be surrounded with massive military force. And that's our right, but nobody else can do anything. Unknown until recently was that at the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis, and this I'm sure will not be mentioned in the publicity that's going out, the people most surprised to learn about the Russian missiles were on Okinawa. Okinawa was theoretically part of Japan, but the U.S. essentially took it over as a major military base. Enormous protests by Okinawans, but doesn't matter. The U.S. had sent advanced long-range nuclear missiles to Okinawa aimed at China, because that's another part of our right with ownership of the world. And they were surprised because they were afraid there might be a reaction to the Okinawa missile bases, but that passed in silence. And, we're kind of getting a minor variant of that right now with Iran. That we must surround them with overwhelming destructive military force. But even if they try to deter it, that's a crime. And that's consistent with what I think is about probably the major principle of international affairs. And if you study international relations theory, all kind of stuff. But the real theory of international relations, I think, is that it's very similar to the mafia. The Godfather decides what has to be done, and if anybody objects, they get crushed. A small storekeeper doesn't pay protection money. You don't just take the money. You send in your goons to smash them up so others don't get the idea that they can do something independent. And that's pretty much the way that the world operates. Not everything, but it's best approximation I know to a serious theory of international relations, and that's what we're seeing now. special case of it. Actually, the Iran case is quite interesting if you're interested in how policies form. Same with Cuba. In the case of Iran and Cuba, the American population has no particular interest in any of this stuff. In the case of Cuba, for almost 40 years, the large majority of the population wants to restore normal relations. In the case of Iran, strongly supports diplomatic settlement. Overriding the public is sort of normal, so nothing surprising about that. But what's more interesting in this case is that major sectors of the American business community want to normalize relations in both cases. They're the guys who usually run policy, and to override them is kind of striking. I mean, in the case of Cuba, it's the energy corporations, pharmaceuticals, agribusiness, really big sectors of power. They want to normalize relations, but the state says no. In the case of Iran, the energy corporations would surely like to get into Iran and not let the Chinese exploit the fields, but the state says no. So here you have a case where state power is overriding even the major sectors of domestic power. And that tells you an important state interest is involved. And I think what the state interest is the mafia principle. That's the way the Godfather would behave. You cannot allow disobedience. It's much too dangerous. And that's why you get these incredible asymmetries which nobody notices.